Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, where you will find interesting guests and discussions about cutting-edge topics to assist you on your journey. The Quantum Guide Show is ideally suited to the newly awakened and for those who feel isolated by their newfound beliefs. The mind, body, and spirit thrive when we have a mission, and there is no greater mission than to become the change that we wish to see in the world. So hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels, and share this show with your friends. Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. In episode 122, I introduce my new guest, Hugh Evans. As an aeronautical engineer and chartered accountant, Hugh applies his professional scrutiny to a lifelong passion for history, offering a new perspective and rediscovering the story. Today, we talk about Hugh's latest book called The Origin of Numbers. Hugh asserts that we use our number system countless times every single day, taking it for granted. After all, we assume that numbers have always been here. But have you ever wondered where our numbers came from and how our and how our system for counting came to be? An ancient civilization created and named our numbers using the heavens. Journey back in time and listen to them speak. Join Hugh Evans, author of The Origin of the Zodiac, on a journey back in time to listen to our ancient ancestors and understand once again the origin of our number system. Hugh, welcome to the Quantum Guide Show.
Thank you for inviting me on the show, Karen.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I saw you on Rex Bear's show, and I just found everything you were saying was so fascinating. It's all like interlocking pieces.
Yeah,
and
certainly
once they
is.
start to unfold, wow. And
Yeah.
you know, I just love the fact that reality is a lot stranger and more robust and interesting than what
Absolutely.
the traditional history books have told us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail, I hope, tonight.
Wonderful. So, did you want to give a little bit more information on the origin of numbers before you start your presentation?
It's, as you said in your introduction, it has been a lifelong passion for me. My earliest recollections as a child were looking at the stars and asking my parents, what was that? And I'd hear all the old names before we got the Latin names. And it's brought the sort of verbal tradition from an incredibly long time ago right up to the present day. And I hope to be able to shed some light on that and enliven it today for the modern audience who perhaps are more familiar with the Latin names for the constellations and the origins that we're told are Latin or Greek, but actually they're an awful lot older than those origins.
Mm-hmm. Now, I understand too that when you go way, way back in time, you're finding the origins of a lot of things come from, is it the Welsh people from the British Isles?
Yes,
and
that's
their
correct.
language?
Their language. I'd like to say at the very start that I don't know whether it originated in Wales. Welsh is the living remnant of ancient British, what I call ancient British. It's also called Common Brittonic and a few other names, but I think those sorts of names hide the origins. So ancient British does what it says on the tin. It tells you what it really is. And ancient British is the closest representation we have of the civilization that charted the heavens, the antediluvian civilization that everyone says is a lost civilization. Well, actually, it's all about us today. We are we're the descendants of that lost civilization. We're still talking the same language and we're still using the same terms. And it is by employing this tool of the Welsh language that we can actually listen to our ancient ancestors, the richness that they bequeathed us, and understand how they thought, because they thought very similar to the way we think. They had similar sized brains. They were intelligent people. They weren't people that were sort of like um, scrabbling around in the ground or just picking berries off bushes. They were very deep thinking people, and I hope to shed a light on that for the viewers tonight.
Wonderful. Now, I have one quick question before we get into it. And that is, I understand that words, as far as language and alphabet and all of that, is actually a form of spell casting, where we form our reality from the patterns of speech that we use. Is there some similarity to that with numbers, or are we talking about a completely different phenomenon with numbers?
I think there is a physical and metaphysical interpretation of numbers. So I think it does cross over into people's beliefs, their spirituality. I will be talking about that. I think they had a wonderful view of their world, the how they existed, and I think they encoded that belief into the numbers and our letters, and that is part of the bequeath that they left us. And I hope that people can start to understand it a little bit more from their perspective.
Sounds fantastic. Now, do you are you able to screen share? I'm pretty sure you are, but
Yeah, let me just I think I got to let me start my slide show. All right, and then let me get back here and ask to screen share. So share. Yeah, I'll try this. What's that? Are we seeing the origin of numbers, the front of my book?
Yes. Oh my goodness,
Right.
you're very good at this.
Okay, right. So here is the cover of my book, The Origin of Numbers. This is my second book. And as you can see on the cover there, we've got images of the numbers 1 to 9. So I explain the origin of our numbers, and then I go beyond 9 to 11, 10, 11, 12, 20, up to 100, 1,000, 100,000, a million, to the largest numbers that have been created by humanity. Within the same book, I also explain the origin of some constants like pi and phi. These are symbols from the back of the book. These are Egyptian numbers. I explain the origin of Egyptian hieroglyph numbers. They come from the same origin, the same people, so we can use the same language to explain the Egyptian hieroglyph numbers. I explain our vowels, the shape of our vowels, where they originated. And if you look at our vowels, which are different from our consonants, all our vowels have symmetry, either in the vertical plane or in the horizontal plane. And that is for a reason. And I also explain the symbols of the planets and our shapes. These great tools that we use every day without thinking about it were all created by one civilization with one language and one system. They named the planets, they named the constellations, they named the stars. So I touch on the stars and the zodiac in my book, The Origin of the Zodiac, which is out now. I have found the origin of the modern zodiac in northwest Wales. And all the names of the constellations are explained using Welsh, and all their adjacencies are explained. The constellations are not a random assembly of shapes, tools, animals that are all jumbled up and make no sense. They all have perfect sense and next to each other, and what they do in the celestial heavens. And I am completing that project in my second book, or on the zodiac, which will actually follow the origin of time, which has just been published. In the origin of time, and the origin of time further develops the concepts that our ancient ancestors gave us, including the conceptualization of time in all its forms, the seasons, the months, the days, all the solstices, equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days. They're all again explained using the same language.
Very interesting.
Because that's what you've asked me to explain this evening, and let me take you from where this started for me. So I was finishing my book, The Origin of the Zodiac, in the star maps of Gwynedd, which is the area of northwest Wales, the ancient kingdom of Gwynedd. And this, by the time I'd finished my work, I realized that it demonstrated a fundamental knowledge, ancient knowledge of the heavens. They knew about the locations of all stars. They'd named the constellations. They knew things like the ecliptic, the path of the sun against the heavens. And they must have been looking at stars for an incredibly long period of time, and it's very, very difficult to estimate how long. But they understood precession. Precession is actually not a Latin word. It is it's a number of Welsh words joined together. And I could ask you, Karen, or any of the viewers, how many precessionary cycles would you have to watch to be sure that it was a repeating cycle? Is it 2 cycles? Is it 3 cycles? It's very hard.
I would guess actually many more than that. But I also think that it would maybe there would be certain people in each society that would keep track and pass that on generation to generation, so that they would have a length of time that they could then look at the results, reliable data, really, in order to form their hypothesis or their program.
Absolutely, as we would want to rely on reliable data in anything that we were doing in our everyday lives today. But it's very difficult to suggest that people were communicating in a common language with a common system over a precessionary cycle, because we've been told relentlessly by our establishments and the people we respect that our ancient ancestors had none of these systems. And what I hope to demonstrate by my books, The Origin of the Zodiac and The Origin of Numbers, is that is just not correct. The explanation we have received from our establishments is not correct. Mm-hmm. And that our ancient ancestors were of far greater ability than we have presently given them credit for. And I actually finished my first book, The Origin of the Zodiac, because I thought I'd run out of things to find. I had again underestimated our ancient ancestors, so now I've got to finish the job off. So anyway, yes. I think our ancient ancestors have been watching the stars for at least 1 precessionary cycle, probably 2, maybe 3. The indigenous people of Australia migrated to Australia 50 to 70,000 years ago, taking the myth of the 7 sisters with them, and then became isolated from the rest of humanity. And it's the same myth. And there have been numerous studies done by universities in Australia on this subject. So the star maps of Gwynedd, therefore, show a connection to this ancient language, which has remained intact in Wales because of the mountainous terrain, the remoteness, even the field systems and the feudal system in North Wales, where farmers have not been able to own their own land for the last 5,000 years, has meant that these things have remained unchanged. And it's an absolute perfect window with which to go back in time and look at our ancient ancestors. So this evening I'm going to be talking about the origin of numbers, but on my YouTube channel, I'm talking about a lot of different subjects where we can use this window to go back in time and look and listen at or with our ancient ancestors. So when you're considering these stars over at least one precessionary cycle, or as you said, Karen, several, and being able to talk and pass on those concepts to your descendants, and this was a verbal tradition. There are no written records. You can't write this on a cave wall in dabs of paint. You can't make notches on a stick because sticks don't last that long. This has to be a verbal tradition that is robust, and this verbal tradition has remained intact right up to the modern day. It's just clouded with layers of other things, and one of the greatest threats to the verbal tradition and a lot of our other fixed traditions or documented traditions is the internet and the vast number of different opinions that can be posted on the internet with nobody scrutinizing them or saying, hey, wait a minute, let's take stock of where we're at. Mm-hmm. So I believe that there must have been a common counting system for our ancient ancestors to map the heavens, having observed at least one precessionary cycle. Mm-hmm. I don't think they could have done it any other way. And having finished the origin of the zodiac, the implications of that began to sink in, and I had time to reflect on a number of things. Our ancient numbers, we are told, the Arabic numerals, which is what they're called because we're told they came to Europe from the Arabs at the when they invaded Spain. We're told that our numbers have evolved from Brahmi numerals from the 3rd century before current era. It cannot feasibly be possible because our ancient ancestors have been watching the heavens for 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years. They can't just have done it since the 3rd century BCE, but that's what we're told. Mm-hmm. There is an academic paper recently written by the University of Reading in the United Kingdom suggesting that our language has developed over the last 150,000 years and that numbers are in the most important group of common words. So that gives us an indication that our numbers are far greater, and this study is implying that these core words haven't changed. It implies that our numbers are far older than Brahmi numerals. So I was considering the celestial heavens, having finished my book, The Origin of the Zodiac, and that our ancient ancestors must have had a counting system that was robust enough and effective enough for them to use. And here we can see 2 images of the celestial hemispheres. We have the northern hemisphere on this side and the southern hemisphere on the left there. And the orange dotted line is the ecliptic. And our ancient ancestors realized that there were 4 bright stars that remained on the ecliptic and did not move. And again, you have to watch the stars for a very long period of time to be sure of that. So here is a GIF, short video of the plough. So everybody knows the plough or the Big Dipper or Ursa Major. So this is the movement of the stars in the plough over 100,000 years. And as you can see, it changes its shape quite radically. It is no longer a Big Dipper at this point. And whereas the constellations do change over, say, 100,000 years, and occasionally the constellations need to be remapped. Our ancient ancestors understood that these four corner stars on the ecliptic did not move, and that the pole star did move over a precessionary period, and we can see the movement of the pole star there in the center.
Mm-hmm.
And they realized that this framework of four stars on the edge of the ecliptic and the pole star above us represented a fixed frame within which you could map the heavens. And they called these the four royal stars. In fact, this is what the Persians called these four stars, and they inherited this from an ancient culture. And now I will apply Welsh, which being the approximation to the antediluvian civilization who named these stars, I will apply it to these stars. So immediately we'll have a look at what the Persians heard. They heard Rial, meaning royal, but this is made in the verbal tradition from a component, Ri, which means what is specific, and behind my little video here, it says chief. Oh, you can just see that now. Mm-hmm. And this component, Ri, is in Real, there it is Ri, and Rial is original lineage, and Riali is 100,000. So now we can start seeing the importance of these stars. These are the original stars that were used to create the framework of the universe. And you can apply this to this language again to all of these stars. I won't do them all. That will just go on and on and on. So I will do Aldebaran, which is again behind our two little videos here. But Aldebaran is the main bright red star. It's the eye of Taurus, the bull's eye. And this is made up of several components. In the verbal tradition, which is still it still holds today, every component of the language has a meaning and cannot be substituted or interchanged. You cannot reverse a word into this verbal language because it would change all the meanings of all the other words. So we can break Aldebaran down into its components. Al is a suffix, which means extra or super, like we would add supermarket. Be means south, bar means summit, and an is to contain. So Aldebaran is the star, the extra special star, if you like, at the south point of the ecliptic, the south summit of the ecliptic, that contains the ecliptic and the progress or the movement of the sun. There is Aldebaran on the ecliptic. And I realized that these four royal stars on the ecliptic, imagine a circle around here, with the observer, you or I or anybody else at the center, these were the cardinal directions with Aldebaran at the south. And from the west, the sloping line up is to the pole star, and this is the number 4. And here is a representation of the number 4 with the ecliptic and the 4 corner stars in their positions: Regulus, Aldebaran, Fomalhaut, and Antares, which just means opposite Taurus. So that was my breakthrough, if you like, in the light bulb moment where I realized number 4, the shape, had meaning and had a celestial interpretation. I then looked at the name of 4 in Welsh, which is Pedwar. And as I've just explained, Welsh words are made up of components. So unlike all these other words for four on the right-hand side here, and for every number, I go through this process with all these languages and the origin in Welsh. In all these other languages, these words just exist. They spontaneously exist in the language. We're not really asked to understand their intrinsic meaning. There is no intrinsic meaning within the English word for. It just exists. It just comes from another origin. Within every Welsh word, there is intrinsic meaning. The components are shared with every other word in the language, and so cannot be substituted, or you can't cheat, basically. So pedwar, ped means what bears onward or afoot. We get pedestrian from this word. Pe, as a prefix, means an agent, something that does something. And war, which is truncated from gwar, is the root for several other words. And these mean the brink or the verge, which is the ecliptic. Gwar is to guard, and we actually get the word guard from this word. So you can see in the English language, there is a lot of Welsh. And chwa, which is the soft mutation of gwar, means to turn, whirl, or turn on a course. So pedwar are the four agents that guard the turning of the ecliptic. That's what pedwar means intrinsically. There is no intrinsic meaning in any other language. And over the centuries and millennia, this has been it has evolved into different languages where people speak differently, and they choose to represent some sounds idiosyncratically in their culture. Pedwar has become quartor or four. So I go through this with all the numbers. Next number that I looked at was the number 1, because I thought that it looked peculiar. I just really had this light bulb moment around the number 4, and my next focus was the number 1. Now, when you or I look at the number 1 on a screen or in a book or in a newspaper, it's normally drawn with a vertically upright column, a small nose, and a flat base. There we are. Here's the base. If you or I draw the number 1 freehand, we tend to just do a vertical stroke. But when we read it and it's represented with all its attributes, it has these other features. And I had the next, I suppose, light bulb moment and realized that the number 1 represented the universe. And here is an image that I made to show the number 1. Here is the vertical column, which represents the rotation of the universe. The base is the plane of the celestial equator, and the nose is the prime longitude. And we still use this system today to chart the heavens. We use right ascension, which is the angular distance from the prime longitude, and we use declination, plus, positive or negative, minus, up, above and below the celestial plane of the equator, to be able to determine the exact location of stars. And this system had been developed tens of thousands of years ago and incorporated into the number 1. Even the name 1 is from these ancient people. So in English, we say 1 is the number 1. We say an, for like an apple is 1 apple. And in all the other languages, un, ein, they're all derivatives. And an in Welsh means to contain. It is the containment of the universe. It is the Sumerian god Anu who contained the universe. It is the Greek god Uranus who contained the universe. And I go through all these associations in my book. Amun, the Egyptian god that contained the universe, all related to the number one. And there is only one source, these ancient people, and one explanation.
The body thrives when it has a mission, and there is no greater mission than to become the change we wish to see in the world. Sometimes, though, we need a little help from consultation and support services. Have you discovered that this world is not what you thought it was? Have recent global events awakened you and leave you feeling unsettled? Do you feel isolated with your not-so-popular newfound beliefs? Would you like to learn to thrive in this new state of awareness? It is a big shock to wake up and find that the old familiar world is gone, and it can be disturbing to go down the various rabbit holes only to find that the information is difficult to digest, and few people are willing to talk openly about it. You are not a conspiracy theorist. You are awakening, and once you find your way through it, there are many blessings on the other side. My name is Karen Holton, and I offer vital services that may be just what you need, and support for your journey into the weird and wonderful. Check out my Awakening Support and Ascension consultation, created to support individuals with their chosen alternative realities and lifestyles, health and recovery, and spiritual adventures. For more details, check out the various vital services found on my website, and be assured that I have found personal success with every category featured. My website is www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com. That's KarenHolton healthcoach.com.
I then went on to number two. And if you are looking east in the Northern Hemisphere, this flat base of the number two is the horizon. And this rising arm of the number two is the rising sun from dawn. And it rises up to noon and then comes back down again to sunset. That is the number two. And that's what the number two means. Number two is from deux, which is the Welsh word for two. And that we get Dieu in French and Deus in Latin. They're all from the same origin. And you can only have the number two, which is the tick-tocking metronomic passage of time given to us every day, light day by the sun, if you have the universe already defined with its column of rotation, its polar axis of rotation. You can't have two defined without having one defined first. So you have a sense of the scale and the concept, physical and metaphysical, of the universe. We're still arguing about the metaphysical origins of the universe. And within that universe, you then have this tick-tock metronomic passage of time on a daily basis. And within that framework, you can now define the number three. Number three is conceptually time at all other scales. It is not the moment of time passing as we're discussing it this evening. It is time before now. It's time after now. It's the time of now for everybody. It's the collective soul over eons back to our origins. It's the movement of the soul of the individual as well. and it is represented by the Milky Way. Each component of the number 3, the top flat top, the angular section in the middle, and the curved bottom, the nearly completed circle, they all have meanings, and I explain them all in my book. But suffice it to say that these 3 components represent the 3 spiritual planes. The spiritual plane, the white of heaven above. Gwyn is white in Welsh, and that's what Gwyneth means. It's spiritually white. It's our goodness, the goodness of our ancestors pouring in to the mortal world. Every star on the Milky Way is the soul of one of our ancestors, and all that goodness pours into the mortal world where we inhabit. And when we pass, we go down into the underworld and go on the last journey to the west, on the Milky Way, on the great ship constellation, and the whole process starts again. So with the number 3, you have this concept of time in a metaphysical sense that has been allowed to be expanded upon, having defined the universe and the tick-tock of time. So I've already discussed 4. Once we have defined the universe as a concept and the movement of time in the moment, but also over the eons, we can now apply a fixed framework within that system of space and time, within which we can define the position of all the other stars. So 4 cannot exist without 3 having been defined, 2 before that and 1 before that. So all the numbers are interdependent in sequence. All their names reflect what they do. All their shapes reflect what they do. This has all been prepared for us by one civilization using one language and one system. Next is the number 5. And I believe this is the orbit of the Earth around the Sun, or representing the solar plane about which the planets orbit, because there are 5 visible planets. There are 2 on this short angled part of the number that are inside the Earth's rotation, and there are 3 on this wavy line at the top that are outside the Earth's rotation around the Sun: Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And we can only define the planets and their movement once we have defined the rectilinear 3-dimensional system to plot their progress within the universe. So I hope you can see that. All the numbers rely on the previous number, and together they create an increasingly rich and detailed explanation of the heavens. And our ancestors created this tens of thousands of years ago. They named the planets, all of the planets. I've only shown 4 here. Mars, Malth, is the greatest. Mercury, Mercha, is the quickest, most erratic. That's what this means in Welsh, what Mercha means. Venus, Gwena, is the brightest. And Gwen is also a smile. So it's actually the planet that has phases rather like the moon. The other planets don't show phases like Venus does. And maybe our ancestors understood this. But the Romans couldn't say Gwena. They turned it into Venus. That's a Latin suffix. And Jupiter is Ei in Welsh, and in Latin it was Iove. And again, this is the Latin interpretation of the Welsh. Now and today it has mutated even further into Jupiter. But it actually means the junior, the youngest. And the best estimate we have of Jupiter's arrival in our solar system is when Schultz's star passed close by 70,000 years ago, and Jupiter may have been captured by our solar system, or it may actually have been further orbiting out further from the sun and not visible, or maybe it was a lot smaller. And as this Schultz's star passed close to the solar system, all our planets were given a big nudge, and then they all had to find their equilibrium positions again. And this is the basis of a lot of ancient mythology, the Greek mythology of Jupiter deposing Saturn. That would be in the Roman mythology. So that all gives credence to these ancient myths that have been passed down. This is what our ancient ancestors saw in the heavens, and they named these planets to reflect that. So coming back to my book, I explain all the numbers, and I'm also taking the opportunity to explain some other things that were important as part of the overall understanding of the world, people's spirituality. So pi, for example, the knowledge of pi is older than its written use. The shape of pi demonstrates, you can't really see that, it's just behind the videos here. There's a straight line here and a curved line in pi, and the top line says this is a ratio between a straight line and a curved line, which is what pi is. In Welsh, you have to write pi P-A-E, because if you write it P-I, it sounds P, but P-A-E sounds pi, and that means a constraint. Po means what extends around, a characteristic of this ratio. So pi is the constraint of what extends around, which is what pi is. It's the ratio between the diameter and the circumference of a circle. And there is no intrinsic explanation of pi in any other language. It spontaneously exists in Greek without any explanation. The word ratio is from the Welsh ratio, which means to fix a law, a regulation. There is no explanation of ratio in any other language. From Latin, we're told it's a reckoning or a calculation. But in Welsh, we have a much more specific and richer explanation. Same again with the sphere. We are told that the origin of the word sphere, so we have all the objects down here on the left, which are in the book that I explain their origin of all their names. The sphere, we're told, is from sphira in Greek, but the actual origin is unknown. We're told that. In Welsh, seraith is a sphere, but the Greeks couldn't say that, so they replaced kyr with sphere, and thus we get sphere is from kyraith. Kyraith is made up of three components: kych, which is a center of a circle, ray is a constraint, and raith is a ray. So a sphere is the extent or the reach of rays from a center, which is a perfect explanation of a sphere. If you have a center and rays emanate in all directions from that center equally, you will end up with a sphere. So it's a very rich and beautiful explanation of this shape using the Welsh language as our living remnant of the antediluvian people that spanned the world. I don't know where they come from originally, but they sought out North Wales to set up the star maps of Gwynedd, partly because of its remoteness, because they wanted it to survive, and it has survived. And now we have this tool, this to look back through this window of an ancient language and listen to our ancient ancestors. So quickly, I'll show you one of the Egyptian numbers explanation, and that is of the number 10. So the Egyptian number for 10 is this shape, which is a cattle hobble. So they would put this around one of the feet, or join 2 feet together with 2 of these to just immobilize some cattle, maybe to milk them or do something else. And this shape represents the moon at its 10th phase over the lunar month. So the lunar month of just like 29.5 days from full moon to full moon is a 30-night cycle if you count the first and last days in each cycle every single time. And then you can break this down into a base 10 system, and you can use this symbol to represent the number 10. And that's what the number 10 represents. It is den or deg in Welsh. So let's go to the dictionary and look at a hobble. So we got 2 words here, and these are excerpts from the dictionaries that I use. I don't print this out every single time because the whole thing will be just completely full of dictionary excerpts, but all my work is repeatable. I don't make any assertions that I cannot back up. Here is a hobble, a gol main, and a golai is light. Golihide is an illumination, and Clwyd is the moon. Berwi is a fetter, and a buriai is a short yoke. So here we have the light of the moon on a short yoke. It is the closest luminary to Earth and makes the quickest transitions. We can't see the sun moving through phases because it's a bright orb, but we can see the moon moving through its phases over the course of a month. It is on a short yoke, and it is fettered and hobbled to the earth. So this is how the ancient Egyptians understood the moon and how they generated their Egyptian hieroglyph for the moon and the number 10. And here is the explanation using the Welsh language. And we can do this across all of their numbers. And I do that in the book. So here is again a brief look at the book. Here's also my 2 existing books, or The Origin of the Zodiac, my existing book, and my current work, The Origin of Time. I am using this same system throughout to demonstrate the connection with our ancient ancestors. And on my YouTube channel, I am uploading videos to complement the work in the books. You can have a look, see if you like the ideas. Some of these YouTube videos aren't going to be explained in the books, but the unicorn is a very old mythical animal, and its meaning goes way back beyond its origins. It actually represents the moon, and it is on the star maps of Gwynedd, the unicorn constellation. So that's what I have at this point.
Well, that's extremely interesting. It seems like everything is kind of tied to everything else. And so it is my belief that that our civilization is much older than what we're told. And it's my belief that it was at one time a global system, because if we link into all this information, the megalithic sites that are all around the globe, so many even in the United States, and there is some evidence even that the cradle of civilization was actually the Gulf of Mexico. So there's evidence that there was a lot of transportation and communication, and it seems to me harmony. So what went wrong? What went wrong, Hugh?
That's a difficult question to answer, but I quite agree with the overall premise, and there's evidence on the star maps of Gwynedd. So I stopped looking for constellations in North Wales when I thought I'd exhausted what the people of North Wales could do.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm finding there constellations from the southern hemisphere, which are not visible from Wales at all. And we know that these are Bronze Age. In fact, they're older than Bronze Age. The British government or the Welsh Heritage Organisation dates them as Bronze Age, but they're obviously Stone Age because they're all made of stone. So whoever set up these southern constellations had already sailed the world.
Yes.
And knew all about it, not by chance. And they accurately represented the southern constellations on the mountains in North Wales. So Mount Snowdon, which is the highest mountain in North Wales, represents Alpha Centauri in the constellation Centaurus, which is right at the bottom of the celestial heavens.
Mm-hmm.
And you cannot move a mountain around afterwards to fit into your star map if you've made a mistake. You've got to start with what you think you're going to do and get it right first time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a long way around to answer the question. What went wrong? Well, we've had a number of historical rewrites over the years.
Yes.
And that's not necessarily what went wrong. It's just whoever's in power at the time, their prerogative to present things the way they want it. It happens all the time. It's never going to stop. But one of the most important ones was probably when the Romans, and I don't think it was necessarily the Romans that asserted this. It was people subsequent to the first Romans, but they said that Rome was started by Romulus and Remus, who was suckled by a she-wolf. Well, in Virgil's Aeneid, I probably got that wrong, but in the ancient Roman historical books, they've got a king's list that goes back hundreds of years before Romulus and Remus.
Mm-hmm.
So Rome didn't start with them. It's just that when Romulus and Remus came to power, they had no authority through direct lineage. So they basically made up a story. And now we have that as the origins of Rome. But even if you look on Wikipedia, it tells us that even the Romans say they got their prime god Mars from the Etruscans, who called it Mawrth,
mm-hmm.
which is the same word that the Welsh call it.
Interesting.
So what went wrong? Well, I think it's just people's. There are people who want to maintain the continuity of history and culture, and then there are people who want to change the continuity. Mm-hmm. And I think there's enough remnants and vestiges of the past to be able to piece together what happens, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's an uphill battle against the establishment that don't want change because maybe just they're just lazy, perhaps they just don't want to change because they can't be bothered. I don't know,
or they don't want to give up their perceived power that they have for quite a long time. What I find interesting too is the more research I do into what I would call alternative history, the megalithic sites and everything else, everything seems to be lined up to have us look to the heavens, specific
Yeah.
stars that are showcased, I guess, with with the different equinoxes or the solstices. So what do you think the purpose is? Like, I understand that the number system comes basically from the heaven, or I should say they are maps of the heavens. Why do you think these ancient populations wanted to leave behind something that would last throughout thousands and thousands and thousands of years to have us draw our attention back to the stars? Do you believe in extraterrestrials, or do you think it has to do with spiritual beliefs, or what do you think that's really about?
Well, I mean, I have got a presentation on that. It would be a new show because
Yeah,
it's
I'm
quite long,
sure. I'm sure.
and but it's there may be facets of all the components you've just mentioned, but there's also a practical reason. Today, we take for granted the the passage of time, that we can measure it objectively. We arranged to have this show tonight. You're in America, I'm in Britain. We arrived at the same point at the same time. We take that for granted today. But in ancient times, it was not taken for granted at all. Those people who controlled time controlled everything. Now, today, the powers that be that control our lives, which we resent, they don't have that degree of control. They don't control our time on a daily basis. We would go absolutely nuts if they did. But it's not that long ago that people did control time to that extent. The In the Roman time of the Republic, the proconsuls each year were elected by the people, and they had the power to extend the length of the year if they wanted it.
Yes.
So imagine if you had a contract to provide meals for a legion for a whole year, and suddenly you had another 30 days added on the end. How would it affect your life? Well, very much so. So there has been a lot of bad behavior over the years, and I think people built these megalithic structures to control time. That will be the main premise of my continuing work, The Origin of Time. That's why they defined all the components of time. And the cover of my first book, The Origin of the Zodiac, is a stone called Kerrig Arthur that is aligned with the spring, well, both of the equinoxes, the sun rising on the equinox and on the sunset, and it's accurate to the width of one sun. So using this stone in the Stone Age, the people who were there had an absolute accuracy of the start of the year. And it's one of the reasons why they built the star maps of Gwynedd so far north. Because if you build your star map out of stone at the equator, all the day lengths are the same length. So you've got no idea whatsoever what day it is. Similarly, if you go too far north and you go up to the Arctic Circle, you've got 6 months of dark and 6 months of sunlight. You cannot make any observations of the year. So you want to go far enough north to get that fine scale, and not too far and not too far south. And the people who set up the star maps of Gwynedd may have originated in the Caribbean or in the Himalayas. They might have been a remnant of civilization that survived some awful cataclysm in in Central Asia, but they came back to establish the star maps to be able then to monitor and manage time so they could command the world. That's why they did it on a practical sense, but they built a whole metaphysical, spiritual understanding around it to engage the community at a social level and at a science level. And it became their religion. Ancient British religion is proto-Christianity.
That makes sense too, because there are a lot of social aspects with the passing of time too. So there would be times, where they would harvest, times where they would plant, times where they would have clan meetings and gatherings, and the weather had to be right. It had to be between, perhaps harvests or whatever else they were doing.
Yeah.
And everything really had to be very, very synchronized for civilization to be successful. And it never ceases to amaze me that the populations of Earth that have been wiped out or attempted to have them just removed, their culture, their beliefs, their everything wiped out, they're the ones that actually carry the information from the stars and from the cycles of time.
Yeah.
So and it's very interesting. Now our time is almost over, but I was wondering if there's anything else you'd like to add. It's just such a fascinating subject, and we could talk probably for 6 hours about all of this. But I wanted the viewers to get a glimpse into your world. It's fascinating. And a lot of people want to do the deep dives. And so I really, really recommend to the viewers that they check out your books, any information you have, your YouTube channel, and you have a website as well, and you're available on Facebook. I'll put all of those links below.
Yes, but, please do.
But, so Hugh, I'm wondering if you have any closing thoughts and words or advice for all of us. And the other thing is, if you could please say where people can find you for those that are listening on the audio only podcast. And of course, those who are listening on audio, come on over and watch the video so that you can see
absolutely
the full presentation.
Well, for those people on audio only, I have a YouTube channel. It's called Origin of the Zodiac. You can search Origin of the Zodiac, Hugh Evans. I've got some other presentations on other channels like the Megalithomania channel and Rex Bear's Leap Project that you mentioned at the start of the show. And I've just done 2 shows with Rex. It was great fun. And I tried to look at some subjects that are not really in my ideas to bring into my books, but would perhaps make nice short videos on my YouTube channel to demonstrate it. Like, for example, the Hopi people's ant myth, which is an American story. There is possibly an explanation using this antediluvian language. The ants people were not people that look like ants, obviously, because, ants and people are very different. But it's an important myth for the Hopi people and maybe a few other indigenous peoples in that area. And I totally respect them all, so I'm not trying to make light of anybody's beliefs. Everyone has a right to their own beliefs. All I'm trying to do is suggest an origin for the words. And so I'm doing those sort of little ideas on my YouTube channel as well. What else can I say? Yeah, check me out on YouTube. My books are available on Kindle. So again, search Origin of the Zodiac, Hugh Evans, and originofthezodiac.com is my website where you can buy books. And we got a 2-book bundle deal that's there. Hopefully, I do worldwide shipping from the UK.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen, for having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, my pleasure. And I'm hoping you'll come back. Let me know when your latest book, it's not out yet. It's coming out soon. The one about the origin of time, right?
Yeah, it'll be a lot later in the year, but I mean, I can do the Origin of the Zodiac between now and then.
If you want to come back, that would be just great. And we can email and find a good time.
Yeah.
I'm booked up now until July, and then I'm taking some time off in July, so it might be August, but I'll definitely put you on the comeback list because it's just fascinating. Plus, there's a lot of people who just don't know. If I hadn't have happened to tune in to Rex's show, I would not have realized the work you've done. It's a very valuable piece of the puzzle
Thank you.
for us
Thank you.
to find out where we come from, where we're headed. And also, you know, once you start to have your eyes open, you don't, your mind, once it expands, it never goes back. So the more educated we are and the more we know what's going on, I think the better our lives can be. And we're not going to fall for the, I'm just going to call them shenanigans that get passed on all over the world from the political or whatever arena. So it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Everybody, please do check out Hugh's links. I think you'll find it so just a wealth of information that you can just knock your socks off when you want to go down those rabbit holes. And really, the other thing too, I really appreciate about you, Hugh, is that you're not somebody who just goes off half-cocked and says, I had a dream and this is how it is. You really have put in the hours of deep research. You know your subject. Very fascinating.
Yeah, as I said, everything I do have done can be scrutinized and checked. Yeah,
it's repeatable. You can.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah,
it bears under scrutiny, which is fantastic. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I want to thank all the viewers for joining us. Without you, we wouldn't even have a show. Please share this out with your friends. This is going to be available on all the podcasts listed above, but even more than that. So everyone will have a good opportunity. Share, comment. If you have some questions for Hugh, leave them in the comments below, and we could perhaps address some of those next time. So until next week, thank you, everybody, and we'll say bye-bye, and we'll see you next week on the Quantum Guide Show. Thank you for joining us on the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change that you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to my YouTube, Odyssey, and Telegram channels. Like this video and share it with your friends. You can also find the Quantum Guide Show and my other podcast called Aliens and Astrology on the Forbidden Knowledge News Network. That's www.forbiddenknowledge.news. And while you're at it, check out my website, www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com, where you will find some amazing products and services and an abundance of free resources to help you with your journey. All of the links are in the description below. And in the meantime, until we see you next week, keep up the good work.
Splendor into endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less. And the sages put me to their test. Heart and soul, I do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I must confess, I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all an illusion,